What we're seeing is the behavior of a universe. Light behaves this way, water behaves this way, planets move this way, these things heat up, these things cool down. All of that is behavior. Understanding the universe came up in conversation during the week. Evolution, creation, intelligent design. This universe that we're trying to figure out, what is it? What is this world? We're always trying to figure out, where did it come from? How did it begin? Is it going to end? All good questions. But before you get to those details, shouldn't we first know, what is this universe? What are we seeing? What is it? We know how big it is. We know how vast it is. We know how complex it is, how awesome, mind-boggling, numbingly awesome. But what? What is it? So Hasidus explains, and I think we've spoken about this before, Hasidus explains that God needs to be recreating the world constantly. If for a moment God stops saying, let there be light, there would be no light. If God stops saying, let there be a firmament, there'd be no heaven. If God stops saying, let the earth give forth vegetation, nothing would grow. In fact, if God stops creating the universe, there would be no universe instantaneously. So God needs to constantly be creating the world, not just once 6,000 years ago, give or take. So in the davening, in the Siddur, we say, "Hamachadesh betuvei b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh bereishis." God renews all of creation, recreates the whole world every day. The Baal Shem Tov said, well, not every day, every fraction of a second. It's constant. And why is it that way? Well, you can teach a dog all sorts of tricks. Can't teach him to talk. Why? A dog is created with certain potentials. Any potential that is not already existing in the dog, you can't add what wasn't already there. In the same way, you can make a teapot out of clay. You can't make a teapot out of water. Clay has the potential for retaining its shape. Water does not. So you can't make water stationary. It doesn't have that capacity or that potential. So when we make stuff, even if it's a magnificent work of art, very creative, we're not creating. To create means to cause something that isn't to be. Now, if you're starting with nothing, and God created the world out of nothing, you can't impose existence onto non-existence, because there's nothing there that would learn to exist. In other words, what doesn't exist does not carry the potential for existence. So to make it exist is an absolute miracle. Therefore, it cannot maintain itself. It has to constantly be recreated. Logical? You throw a stone into the air, it'll fly for a few seconds, and then it'll fall back down to earth. Why? Why can't you teach a stone to fly? Because it doesn't have the potential. So can you teach nothingness to fly? Nothingness has no potential. So that's why when you create out of nothing, you got to keep creating, because the nothingness is not going to hold the shape you gave it or the existence you gave it. So it will immediately revert to non-existing because it hasn't learned to exist, which means the world itself does not exist. It's constantly being existed. Just like the stone, which inevitably falls back down to earth, was never a flying stone. It was carried by the force of your throw. So it was flown. It does not fly. So if you see a stone pass your window on the third floor and you say, wow, a flying stone. No, a flown stone. And that's why your first reaction is, who did that? Who threw that stone? And if I tell you, no, it was just a flying stone, you'd laugh at me. Stones don't fly. Oh, but this one flew. No, it didn't flew. It was flown by a stronger force. Same thing with creation and existence. The world exists, not really. It is being existed. And that's why if God stops existing it, it won't exist. As if it were never created. Now scientists come along and they want to figure out, what is this universe made of? What are the building blocks? So there was a time when science discovered the atom and was convinced that that is the smallest and indivisible element of existence. It is the essence of all, and everything is made up of these atoms. But then they discovered that the atom itself is divisible. There are subatomic particles that make up the atom. So now let's say we're down to an electron. Can you divide an electron? Probably. When you divide the electron, what do you end up with? I don't know, I'm just... a quark? A quanta? Whatever it's called, a photon? We're getting down to things that are so small that they will never be seen. No matter how powerful the microscope, you'll never see it. And the next conclusion that the physicists came to was that really there is no tiny substance that makes up the world. What we're seeing is the behavior of a universe. Light behaves this way, water behaves this way, planets move this way, these things heat up, these things cool down. All of that is behavior. What substance is behaving that way? Modern science says there's no substance. It's just behavior. But what's behaving? No, there's no what. There's just behavior. When we get so used to a behavior, when it is so predictable and so often repeated, it starts to look like a thing. It congeals into what looks like an object. But it's just behavior. The object appears as a result of the behavior. It's not the object that causes the behavior. So there's the behavior of water before there is a drop of water. That's called creating something out of nothing. Tangible out of intangible. Visible out of the invisible. So how do we describe that? Look at what the Torah says. What was the first thing God created? Everybody knows. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. That's strange. Shouldn't God have said, "Let there be kerosene," and then light it? Shouldn't God have said, "Let there be a hot gas that gives off light," and then we'll call it the sun? What does it mean, "let there be light"? Shouldn't there first be a lighter? How do you have illumination without a lumen, without a illuminator? So it's so obvious. God didn't create something that gives off light. Light doesn't have a source. God created it out of nothing. So there was no illuminator, but there was illumination. There was no flame. There was no bulb, but there was light. In other words, God created the behavior of light. And the same with all other things that God called into creation, into existence. God said, "Let there be grass," or "Let the earth give forth grass." God said, "Let there be a firmament. Let us make man." All of this is describing a behavior. When that behavior repeats itself often enough and in the exact same way, then it becomes the object that we are now identifying as light, grass, heaven, human. So what the scientists today discovered, the Torah told us 3,000 years ago. God didn't create electrons that give off energy. God created energy that runs around. And when it keeps running around, we notice it and we call it an electron. So what are we left with? The entire universe, everything in nature, is a behavior pattern. Now, how does the behavior follow a pattern? Because it's following an instruction. God said, "Let there be light," so it behaves like light. God said, "Let there be a cow," it behaves like a cow. So when you see a cow in the meadow, just standing there chomping on the grass, what are you seeing? You are seeing God's instruction expressing itself in such a consistent way that it becomes visible to the human eye. It is a behavior pattern that we can see. And we call it nature only because we're used to it. In fact, the word nature means what we're used to. So when we say why does water run downhill? That's its nature, which means that's what we're familiar with. We've always seen water run downhill. So that becomes its nature, meaning its predictable behavior. So now we have a completely different view of the universe. the universe and everything in it, all the galaxies and the stars and the planets and the earth itself and the mountains and the oceans, everything is simply obeying God's instruction. So when you look at a cow, what are you seeing? You are seeing an obedient response to a command. Let there be, and there be. So the cow is being a cow. Why? How? Because God said, be a cow, be a cow. And what we're seeing is the response or the result of that command. So the entire universe is buzzing, is humming in obedience and in response to the word of God. An amazing universe. So when it says the heavens sing of your glory, how do they sing? By being a heaven. God said, be a heaven, it's a heaven. And it's a moral lesson for us. God tells a cow to be a cow, and look at how loyal the cow is to that command. Never for a moment does it stop being a cow. Never for a moment does light stop being light, which teaches us that God says, be my people, be a holy nation, be kosher, keep Shabbos. We should be as loyal to our command as the cow is to its command. And it's not true that the cow has only one mitzvah, be a cow. Being a cow is not so simple. There are many details in that commandment. Be a cow means chew your cud. Chew your cud means have 2 stomachs, 4 stomachs, I don't know how many stomachs. Be a cow means have split hooves. Not every animal has split hooves. Be a cow means eat grass. Be a cow means produce milk. Be a cow means give birth to a calf. It's so complicated. So a cow has many commandments and it obeys them all without fail. We should be the same. We are given a number of commandments. Let's not get particular about how many. Okay, 613. But if that's what we are commanded to do, why don't we do it as consistently, as naturally, as effortlessly as a cow being a cow? Why are we plagued with doubts, with uncertainties, with questions, with objections, with resistance, defiance? Why? If God tells light to be light, it is. If God tells us to be kosher, why is there a debate? So, of course, you're going to say, because God gave us freedom of choice. Freedom of choice means I can choose to disobey. But that itself needs explanation. How is it that God can both tell us to keep Shabbos and yet give us the option of not keeping Shabbos? See, it would make sense if God said, there is Shabbos, and it's up to you if you want to keep it or not. There are kosher animals, non-kosher animals. You decide which ones you want to eat. Then I would understand freedom of choice. But when God says, do not do any labor on Shabbos, that's like saying, let there be light. And yet we still have freedom of choice. So it's not like God is neutral on the subject. He said, don't do it. A few times in the Torah, he says, remember the Shabbos. Don't do it. But we have free choice. How does that work? It must be that the free choice is the way in which God wants us to keep Shabbos. In other words, it's not a contradiction. It's not like, I told you to keep Shabbos, why do you have a choice to make? No, I want you to keep Shabbos, but by your choice. If you have to keep Shabbos, then it's not a mitzvah anymore. It's only a mitzvah if you choose to do it. And to choose to do it, you also have to be able to choose not to. Otherwise, there's no choice. So even when a human being is making a choice, he's sitting there thinking, should I, shouldn't I, will I, won't I? That is also divine energy humming, pulsating, and making the world alive. That is a response to God's instruction. Because just like God says, keep Shabbos, God says, have freedom of choice. And do the mitzvah out of your free choice. The respect that we should have for the natural world, although we're told not to get too caught up in it, it's only a physical universe, it's not the holiest of places, it's the lowest of all worlds. That's all true. But the lowest of all worlds is doing exactly what God tells it to do. That's what it is, an obedience to God's instruction. Can we do any less? Sure, we have freedom of choice. But when you see the whole universe obeying God's instruction, doesn't that tell us which choice we should make? So the world can be inspiring, not just depressing or discouraging. If you enjoyed this conversation or this topic, and you're looking for more information, or you want to hear it again from another angle, there's a way to do that. And that is in this book. It's all there. Order it from Amazon. You can read it, reread it, and share it. I want to invite you to join us as VIPs, partners in our work, and join us also for a personal chat with other members of the VIP club. We talk about many things. There's an opportunity to ask, to respond, to make a comment, to meet the other supporters. And together we can really make a difference in Jewish life and in life in general. So join us. It's goodtoknow.org. Log in, call, make contact, and join us with the VIPs.